Between the years 1999 and 2016, there were over 630,000 deaths related to drug overdoses. Of the overdose fatalities in 2016, 2 out of 3 were related to opioids. This is 5 times greater than in 1999. Opioids is a term used for the entire family of opiate drugs, including natural, synthetic, and semi-synthetic. These drugs are chemically related and interact with opioid receptors on nerve cells in the body and brain. Medically, they are primarily used for pain relief and anesthesia. In the early 1990s, pharmaceutical companies were pushing their new opioids to physicians and medical professionals, stating that their drugs were not addictive. This led to high distribution of addictive substances to the public. That was the first wave of the opioid epidemic, which mainly involved prescription pain medications. The second wave began in 2010 with an increase in the overdose rates involving heroin. The third wave of the opioid epidemic began in 2013 and left us with record-breaking statistics on overdose rates, which now involve illicitly manufactured fentanyl. This epidemic has affected all socioeconomic classes and is even causing tension on a global scale. Peoples aged from 45 to 64 account for 40% of all overdose deaths, and the majority of these individuals were prescribed opioids from their physician at one point in time. Addiction is a mental illness that can be treated if individuals seek medical care. However, most do not. I believe they are afraid of being reprimanded from breaking the law by not taking their prescriptions as directed. Or maybe they've even moved on to heroin. Either way, these individuals are still members of our communities, and we all share the responsibility to help them receive the treatment for their disease, not incarceration. The United States' demand for drugs also lies at the heart of violence in Mexico. The majority of the heroin in the United States is black tar heroin, named for its crude processing and comes from Mexico. Heroin has also been used as chemical warfare. 20% of U.S. soldiers in Vietnam became addicted to heroin. Surprisingly, only 5% relapsed when they came home after treatment in Vietnam, compared to the 90% that relapse after treatment where they live. The theory behind these statistics is that changing the soldiers' environment after their treatment was enough to change their behavior. The soldiers didn't have the physical cues they once did that stimulated their addiction. The opioid epidemic is also hypothesized to have had a huge impact on our workforce. The epidemic could account for the observed 20% decline in men's labor force participation. Alan Kruger from Princeton University studied the toll the opioid epidemic has had on the labor force on a local and national level. His research shows that from 1999 to 2015, labor force participation dropped in counties with higher rates of opioid prescription. Kruger also found that half of the men who are not participating in the labor force take prescription pain medications on a daily basis, and 2/3 of those men use Medicare, Medicaid, or Veteran Affairs to pay for their medications. Opiates have been used for thousands of years, both for recreational purposes and medicinal. In the 16th century, laudanum was an alcoholic solution containing morphine used to treat pain. Pure morphine was first extracted from opium in the early 19th century. It was widely used as a painkiller for the Civil War, but many soldiers became addicted. So many soldiers became addicted, the post-war opioid addiction became known as soldier's disease. Heroin was first synthesized in 1898 as a derivative from morphine that was supposed to be a non-addictive substitute. However, by the end of the 19th century, the US had realized their drastic mistakes and started to end the use of opioids for non-medical purposes. In 1909, Congress passed the Opium Exclusion Act, barring opium importation for the purpose of smoking. 5 years later, there was a big tax placed on opioids, and physician and pharmacist registration was required for distribution. From an economical standpoint, I'm sure the rise in opioid production seemed like a good thing at the beginning. More distribution means more production, which means more jobs and market activity, while having the illusion of doing good by taking away pain. But now that we have all the information, the CEA estimated that in 2015, the economical cost of the epidemic was $504 billion, which correlates to 2.8% of GDP that year. This is 6 times greater than the most recent estimate. Clearly, this is economically unfavorable, but those afflicted can't afford their life-saving treatment. I believe possible solutions to this epidemic should include individuals having the choice to choose rehab in place of prison. Also, new medical technology should be in place to stop prescribing opioids outside of the hospital altogether, such as performing more nerve blocks for surgery and steroid injections for pain management. Hopefully, in the near future, we can end opioid prescriptions altogether.